My name is Heather Conley. I'm president of GMF. The warmest of welcome to you and Happy New Year to everyone. We are so excited here at GMF for launching a first in a series focusing on the Black Sea and the strategic imperative of the Black Sea. This was really inspired by an uptick of congressional interest in the Black Sea region and recent legislation that was introduced requiring the United States to create an interagency US Black Sea strategy that focused on enhanced military assistance, economic support, and strengthening democracy. And of course, this is absolutely the three key pillars that the German Marshall Fund has been working on over the last 15 years from our Bucharest office and certainly our Black Sea Trust. Of course, it's also an important moment as we come up on the 1-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. So it's important to take stock of the region and understand its strategic imperative. I cannot think of a better person in the world to both start this conversation and this Black Sea series and our kickoff for 2023 than our dear friend, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and of European Integration of the Republic of Moldova, Nicu Popescu. Dear Nicu, it's so fantastic to have you with us. You are a frequent guest and a much sought after guest at GMF for your insights and your perspective. So welcome, welcome. And let me just kick off on this Power 30 minutes. Help us set the scene here. What is your vantage point from Chisinau, 11 months into the full-scale war? Your intelligence chief last month said that there was a, quote, high risk of Russia trying to seize a southern land corridor that would connect their occupation of Ukraine to Transnistria. So help us understand the perspective, and then let's dig into a Black Sea strategy and certainly the US perspective there. My friend, over to you. Help us set the
scene.
Thank
you very much, Heather. It's really a pleasure and an honor to meet you and to see so many friends who are watching this. And as you know, that we've always been very supportive of each other, and I've done events at DC in your office, and I continue to work very closely with the Black Sea Trust, who have had a great contribution to the strategic debate in our part of the world for the last decades, I can say. Now turning back to the issues and the questions that you asked me. 11 months into this war, of course, the war reshaped everything, the region, Europe, but not only Europe, and we have seen how events happening in the Black Sea are immediately negatively affecting pretty much everyone else, not just Moldova, but we've seen, of course, Europe, the Euro-Atlantic community, but also countries in the Middle East and North Africa, which had seen their grain and cereal supplies disrupted. When we talk about nuclear risks and fears, that's something that affects everyone in the world. So we have seen how what you have been talking about, and we have been talking about the centrality and importance of the Black Sea in global developments, has unfortunately been very confirmed in these last few months. Situating Moldova in this global context, of course, we are much more impacted and affected by this Russian brutal aggression against Ukraine than pretty much any country except and after Ukraine. Our problems are incomparable to the suffering of Ukraine. At the same time, we are in this region, we're very affected. So managing the consequences of this war for our security, for the humanitarian situation in Moldova with the refugees, for our energy security, for our economic well-being, for our capacity to build prosperity and strengthen our state. So we have really been dealing with it almost full time in the last months, and we've been trying to minimize the negative impact of this war on our citizens. And in recent months, we've had several Russian missiles crossing our airspace. In one instance, Russian missile debris fell on our territory. We've had blackouts due to the Russian bombing of Ukrainian infrastructure, which immediately affected our country on a couple of occasions. So we've been really doing all of it together. At the same time, we've made our best. We've done our best to concentrate psychologically, politically, administratively on getting the necessary reforms in place, on bringing Moldova closer and eventually into the European Union, strengthening our partnerships with those countries and institutions and organizations that support Moldovan liberty, democracy, and Europeanness. So we've really had a very active process of implementing reforms, investing in our energy resilience, renewables, accession to the European Union, strengthening our partnership with the United States, with Canada, with Japan. Of course, we have our friends and neighbors in Romania and Ukraine. So we're really doing almost everything that needed to be done even before the war started. So this is where we are as a country, as a society. It's been a difficult year. The year ahead, 2023, will not be easy. But nonetheless, we're on a trajectory and we're in a dynamic that is making Moldova stronger, is making Moldova more connected to the European and Euro-Atlantic space. And we do it in all the domains, in trade, in politics, in democracy building, in countering disinformation, in cybersecurity, in energy resilience, in security and defense. And we do dozens and dozens of actions and partnerships and joint projects across the board.
You really can feel that this is such an incredibly strategic moment, an opportunity to be seized. And as you said, your activity, diplomatic activity, the integration work that you're doing with the European Union, your relationship with the United States. I mean, the intensity of activity is impressive. It's important, but you don't shy away from the daunting challenges. And I think the one of the clear challenges is energy security. And we have seen where certainly Moldova has been a victim of Russian weaponization of energy. We know where US and European assistance has come into that. The United States just announced a few days ago a $30 million provision through the World Bank Trust Fund for, to help with that energy, those energy prices, which are certainly eroding public support. You sought the EU joint gas purchasing program to help reduce those costs. Help our audience understand, the work that is being done, not only to address the immediate issues, but again, your integration with Euro-Atlantic institutions. This is just continuing to strengthen that important work that you've been doing.
Yes, thank you. So indeed, energy is one of our biggest vulnerabilities. But then if I would set the scene, I would say that, of course, in the last 20, 30 years, Moldova started from a situation where the country was very exposed, very dependent on what was happening to the east of us. With time, we've managed to decouple and build up our resilience and independence from negative trends in the east, and we've connected to the west in multiple domains. So if you look at trade, for example, some 2/3 of our trade goes now to the European Union, and we trade more and more each year with other partners, with Turkey, countries in the Middle East. So we've really over time been able to significantly decrease our exposure, negative exposure to what happens in the east and what happens in the east, in light of multiple Russian embargoes, politically motivated embargoes on Moldovan products, has helped us build a degree of trade and economic resilience over time. And if we look back to the situation before the war, I could tell you that around 9% of our exports a year ago were going to Russia, for example. So that signals a degree of trade differentiation that helped our country both economically and strategically in this last year. That's not the case when it comes to energy. When it comes to energy, we've been over the last 20, 30 years, we've been less efficient in finding alternatives. We wasted a lot of time, and we've had to accelerate all of these processes. So when we say energy, we immediately kind of disassemble this into several components. One element of our energy security is related to gas and the security of gas supplies. With that, we have a gas pipeline that is connecting us to Romania. It was built in the last few years. So to a significant degree, we have some potential alternatives. What we did in recent months, we tried to shift our energy mix away from gas into firewood, coal. I understand it's not great for the environment, it's very bad, but this is the situation we are. So we've been trying to consume less gas. We've also been calling on the population to save gas consumption. Plus, we have this pipeline to Romania. And actually, what happened in the last now 14 months is that for the first time ever, Moldova started buying gas elsewhere than Gazprom. And in the last month or so, we've been buying all of our gas needed for heating from the regional spot market. So this is what we've been doing, and we've been quite good at trying to make sure that we find a degree of alternatives. None of this is easy, none of this is cheap, but this was happening. A second element is electricity. And here we've been to a degree more at risk from disruption of electricity supply, partly because we don't have yet a high capacity direct electricity interconnector with Romania. We've had some small capacity interconnections. We have another line that goes through Ukraine and through the Transnistrian region. So we are now building this separate new interconnector for electricity with Romania. For example, in November, Romania was supplying 90% of our electricity needs. But what happened since early October is that the Russian bombing of Ukrainian electricity infrastructure affected us in a massive way. We used to get a third of our electricity imports from Ukraine. That electricity is no longer there because of the Russian destruction of Ukrainian electricity networks. And on some occasions, Russia's targeting of specific substations in Ukraine meant that the electricity supply in Moldova was also affected. So we've had two big instances of blackouts. So we're trying to work on that. We're building this connection to Romania. We used to get electricity from Romania. At the same time, we're also making sure that we're investing as much as we can into having a supply of renewable electricity. So we're working on that. We've had several companies last year that moved into our market with a view to building renewable power plants, windmills, photovoltaic power. So this is where we are. And I think it was a pretty successful year, but of course, quite a lot remains to be done in this field for us, but also for pretty much anyone else in the region.
Well, it seems to me that what you're doing in, accelerating diversification, even though obviously environmental issues are unfortunately across Europe are having to take a step back to the need, but you're taking weapons out of the Kremlin's hands by that diversification and that closer integration with Europe. I'm wondering, just turning to another weapon that is used is disinformation, corruption, and certainly Moldova historically has been an epicenter of Russian disinformation and use of malign economic influence. Help me understand, again, 11 months into the intensity of this war, what steps are the government taking to help shield public opinion? As you said, this is a dire economic situation. And of course, you took the very controversial move, the government, of shutting down 6 outlets in Moldova because of that Russian disinformation. Help us understand the sort of the war you're waging on that front.
So I would partly start again by placing that in a wider context. And I think the reality is that our country, our society has been exposed to massive amounts of disinformation, not just in the last months and years, but pretty much since even before our independence in August 1991. And actually, if you look at a Russian news bulletin about Moldova or about Ukraine, I don't think there's a big difference as to what Russian propaganda was saying about our country and our society in mid-91 or in 92 or now. So I think there's a degree, with time, there's a high degree of resilience that our society developed in the face of this basically hostile, targeted disinformation operations against our country, against our society, against our democracy. So to a large degree, I think our society, time and again, proved that it is committed to democracy, it is committed to us joining the European Union, even though it has been exposed to incredible amounts of disinformation in the last 30 years. Having said that, of course, the issue is there. It got significantly worse with the launch of the war. So from the first days of the war against Ukraine, we banned Russian TV, political news and programs. And then a few weeks ago, we basically banned for the duration of the emergency situation in Moldova related to the war, Russian news TV channels, because they have been a factor trying to destabilize our society, propagating and advocating for war, for this brutal aggression against Ukraine. So this is where the context is, I think, to a large degree. And of course, it's a kind of wide set of issues that we're all dealing with, and there's the online elements, the TV. But overall, I would say that our society has been exposed to this for a long, long time. It has managed to build a degree of democratic maturity, societal resilience, if you want. And that also allowed us to, time and again as a society, to vote for governments that want to fight corruption, want to strengthen democracy, want to connect our country closer with the West. That's what we're doing. So we're kind of very focused on making sure that, yes, we combat, we limit the negative effects of disinformation, but actually the real effort goes into doing our best to make sure that Moldova is irreversibly integrated with the West.
Absolutely, that's a perfect segue into sort of turning now to U.S. and European Union strategies towards the wider region, and we'll pull out the lens a little bit. I mean, if you could wave your magic wand, what would you have in this U.S. government, this interagency strategy that we're certainly understanding that it's being developed by the State Department, lots of congressional interest? What does it need to say and do from your perspective?
So before I answer this question directly, and that's partly a question of how our partners can help Moldova, and that's a question I regularly get. I want to say that, yes, Moldova has been really relying on our partners, on the United States, on the European Union, on the EU member states, and Canada, Japan, for our economic, political, democratic, security, stability, and survival, and everything. At the same time, for us, it's not a one-way street. We are contributing to regional and global solutions. We have played a major role for the entire European continent when it comes to the management of the refugee crisis and the humanitarian crisis. We've really been doing our best to fast-track anything that is related to Ukrainian exports and imports as well through Moldova. Partly the so-called EU solidarity lanes designed to make it easier for Ukraine to especially export cereals to the Middle East or North Africa and the rest of Africa. So we've really done our share in contributing to what the community of democracies and most countries in the world have done to alleviate and limit the negative impact of the war. So when I talk about, yes, how can you help Moldova, I want to start by saying that we're doing our best with limited resources, and we want to do more, and we will do more. And as we speak, we're trying to play a much more active role in peacekeeping missions in the world with our partners, with the European Union, with the United Nations, etc., etc. So when it comes, so it's a two-way street, and the more we manage to strengthen Moldova, the more we will contribute. That's our mindset, and we are already contributing. Now, the United States and the European Union and other partner countries, the UK, Canada, Japan, has really been with us day and night since already before the war. We were getting intelligence, of course, briefings from the United States before the war. We've been preparing for the effects of this war on Moldova from around, late autumn 2020. And we've been doing that with the US and with our partners. Back in April, the international community launched the Moldova support platform, and the US is coming with significant contributions. So really pretty much everything I've spoken about our security and defense needs, about energy resilience, about disinformation, the United States is helping and other partners are helping. We're talking here about measures to alleviate the social impact of the energy crisis. We have really a great security and defense partnership with the US and the European Union. There have been measures, as you know, adopted on strengthening that dialogue, which is strengthening Moldova's capacity to defend itself and to maintain peace in our territory. When it comes to energy, again, the United States stands by us in pretty much all the diplomatic efforts, but also in helping us shift and manage this energy transition to less gas, to new sources, to renewables. On disinformation, again, we really are working very closely. I'll give you another example. We've been looking for new markets for our agricultural producers, and we've been going to the Middle East, trying to find new markets to those exporters that have been affected by Russian blockades and the war. And actually USAID, the US Agency for International Development, is helping us to go to countries like Egypt, like India, and other countries, and to find and develop new partnership for our agricultural exporters. So we really are doing hundreds of actions together with the United States, and that's helping us keep peace in Moldova. It's helping us keep stability in Moldova. It's helping us keep Moldova as a democracy and as a committed partner for the wider community of democracies. And this is where we are. And speaking of exports, because I just mentioned it, it's much more difficult to export these days because of the blockade of the Black Sea and Odessa, because of the war, because of the disruption of logistical links. And yet, not least with the support that we're getting, we've managed to export last year as a country more than we did in 2020. So even against all odds, against disruption, against war, against blockades, we have managed together, not least with the US and European support, to make sure that we limit the impact of this war on our society. And that's a good occasion to thank all our partners for supporting us in that.
Well, as you were speaking, I was thinking of President Kennedy's, but I'm going to paraphrase his comment: ask not what the United States can do for Moldova, but what Moldova can do with the United States and like-minded partners to advance the cause of freedom. And I think that's a really important message, because, you know, what we heard constantly for the last several months is the Western fatigue. The fatigue with continuing to support, and the generosity, and I want to underscore the generosity of the United States in support for Ukraine, support for Moldova, the entire region. But that point of Moldova and our partners, what they're doing to contribute to increasing economic opportunity, to enhance security. I think sometimes that's missing as we concentrate on the politics of the amount of assistance that is going, but not thinking about the power of that partnership. I think that's an important point. In our last few minutes, I mean, what is missing though? What's missing in the broader transatlantic strategy? I mean, what's always missing is there always needs to be more. We appreciate certainly that. But yeah, I mean, President Sandu put forward a very impressive goal, you know, European Union membership by 2030. I think you have to have a goal. I think that's leadership, and then you work very hard and focused on that goal. Are you concerned in any way, because it's a political decision for our EU partners, and the politics of enlargement have gotten much more difficult over the years? How do you put forward that vision of strong integration, EU membership by 2030, which is so essential? US support for that is quite complete. But are you worried about disappointment? Are you worried about not achieving that goal?
So I think we're all going through very dramatic and tragic times, not just in Eastern Europe, but globally. The next years will be extremely difficult. And you know how, and I try to keep myself up to speed on the US debate about East Asia and not just Eastern Europe, right? Also, the years ahead will be difficult. And it's in this kind of times that democracies and partners need to be sticking to each other, need to be nurturing each other. And yes, a lot of our partners are large states with a lot of resources, but actually most of the countries of the world are not very big. So the way you can act together to change global problems and to minimize global dangers is by really nurturing and maintaining this network of strong partnerships with a lot of countries that are not very big, like Moldova. And we've been doing that very successfully with the US, with the countries of the European Union. Now, at the same time, where I see all of the elements being in place for this partnership, where I do think that we all need to put much more effort is in accelerating things. If you're a country that has had a democracy for several decades or several hundreds of years, and you have a strong administrative capacity, and you're planning, and the speed of implementation of your measures is years and years, well, in this part of the world, our countries don't have 10 years ahead of them just to kind of relax and go at the usual bureaucratic and administrative speed of processes. The nature of challenges is brutal. The nature of these challenges is urgent. So everyone needs to be much faster. Moldova needs to be much faster, but also the United States, our European partners, can no longer act at the speed of action and interaction of the last 10, 20 years, which were times of peace in this part of the world. And now this region is affected by war, and there's a huge difference from a situation where something we agree on, whether it happens today or it happens in 12 months from now. And that is why we really are all in great need, urgent need to really accelerate what we do, our capacity not just to plan and then go at this usual peacetime speed, because this situation is dramatic. It's not going to get better very fast. And we all need to act much quickly, not least in delivering on all of those set of commitments, promises, and many of them, of course, are in the Congress, and they have been approved and budgeted. Now it's important for us to deliver on these mutual agreements, mutual ways to strengthen Moldova's security and peace and stability, and thereby regional peace, security, and stability, not in 2027, not in 2025, but already this year. And for that, we really need a degree of cultural and administrative change that has been happening. It's much better than expected, but still there's a long way to go in the capacity of everyone to act with more urgency in fast-tracking what needs to be done to make sure that this war does not continue weighing on global and regional geopolitics in the same way it does today.
So I think that is a really valuable point. I think it's taken both from the region, seizing this strategic moment, accelerating. I think if I look back and reflect on the region over the last 15, 20 years, it's lost time in doing all of these important things. Europe lost time in doing this diversification, energy diversification that was so needed. And we're all paying a terrible price for that. But I also agree with you, there needs to be a paradigm shift in US strategy, in its own urgency. We're sort of using those same mechanisms that aren't exactly to the speed and the nimbleness and the flexibility that this transitory moment in the international system requires. So urgency, accelerate, seizing the strategic moment. Those are great watchwords as we begin a new year. And I just want to close out in our last 30 seconds here. Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, do you have any New Year's predictions or resolutions that you would like to share with us as we start this year? I know resolutions are made to be broken, so I don't want to say that, but what predictions that you have for the region as we close out?
I don't have predictions. Unfortunately, in my job description is to be preparing for the full spectrum of scenarios, and the positive ones are easy to manage, but then we have to be, whether we believe it or not, we have to have a plan for negative contingencies, and that's what we're doing. So no predictions, but work on the full spectrum of scenarios. And the resolution is we need to move faster. This is what I said. We need to move faster. We don't have another 3 or 5 years to get this part of the world right. And that is a joint effort of the United States, of the European Union, of the United Kingdom, and of Moldova, which is bringing its own contribution into making sure that this war does not spread, that peace and stability is maintained on the European continent to the extent that is possible. And this is what we're doing. And for that, we really all need to act much faster.
preparation, resilience, and the need for speed. Important words. Nico, it is always such a privilege and a pleasure to hear your insights and your perspective. And we look forward to a very focused year on the Black Sea region and strengthening U.S. Moldovan relations and strengthening Moldova's Euro-Atlantic integration. The best way I can think to start the new year. Thank you, colleagues, so much for joining us. Look out for more additional series in our new Black Sea Strategic Highlight Series. And again, many thanks to you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, for your time. With best wishes for a great new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to everyone. And Heather, you know that we agreed that next time we do something together in person in Chisinau. And we can stream it, of course, but it's much better if we'll be sitting next to each other.
See you in Chisinau, sir. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.